Could I have all three speakers on stage? And we can proceed with the discussion around this. As you can see, much to discuss, much to reflect on, much to do. Could I start with Dr. Lakshman? In your expertise, what are the short term and the long term physical as well as psychological impacts on health risks, basically associated with child marriages, particularly for young girls? But also, can we talk about what are the risks, maternal health risks? Because a lot of these young women, they have early pregnancies that result from the child marriage. So, what are the risks that we're looking at?
Thank you very much, and congratulate the previous speakers for bringing out the subject and the necessary areas. At the outset, let me say something before I talk about the health consequences. As a healthcare provider, I am very much worried, not only the classical child marriage that we are talking about, where it's a legal kind of thing that we are talking about. There is quite a large number of similar girls in what is called a cohabiting relationship or a living together. What I'm going to talk to you applies to them as well, and there are many of them in this country. So the picture in this country is a little different from the other Asian countries, where it is a formal marriage supported by the families, whereas here it is out of necessity or out of avoiding something. Parents go to the extent of allowing them to be living together. So what I'm going to talk about is that, and what we see as healthcare providers are mostly from them. Secondly, when it comes to health issues are not exclusively health dependent. It's an intersection of other vulnerabilities as well, where there is socio-economic deficits, where are other marginalized communities. When the child marriage or the cohabiting relationship takes place there, the health effects are very much more. On top of that, the attitudes and the stigma or the value of a woman or gender discrimination within the society adds to that. On top of that, the availability of health services and the access is what determines the ultimate outcome. Having said that, consequences of health consequences can be initially, let us talk about the sexuality issues. A young girl, very young girl, very often less than 16 years, is married to somebody very often much older. Unfortunately, that is what happened. In Sri Lankan situation, it may not be that bad because they are in a friendly or sort of romantic relationship, and they are forced to join together. Within that kind of relationship, the sexuality issues faced by the girl is pretty bad, because sexual health is defined by WHO as a relationship where both parties are able to enjoy the sexual act. In such a situation that happens in child marriages, it is totally not so. I think you will remember a couple of months ago, it was reported, one incident was reported in from one of our countries, where the child was, I think, 16 years or less than that, 15 years, I think, and the husband, the bridegroom was, I think, 60 or something like that. They were married, and in the night, he found it difficult to get on with it, or the child found it difficult to manage that. He used this knife on her. In the morning, she was found dead. And that is the disaster that tells a very serious story. Apart from that, the next problem, consequence of child marriages is pregnancy, in teenage pregnancy, or pregnancy in a very young child. Pregnancies on 17 years old may not have that much of harm, but less than 16, it is pretty tricky. And it is, for one thing, they don't access maternity care because there's stigma and other things that are related to it, that they don't come for care. And at some point, there was a legal issue which prevented them coming, and the health people, I'll talk about it later if necessary. But at the moment, they can access if they want, but the stigma prevents them coming. So they come late. They are more vulnerable to a lot of complications. Hypertension, the anemia, so many other implications are there. When they go into labor, they will have their own problems with that. And even after the baby, they are not prepared. Actually, it's a child bringing up another child. That is the kind of situation that we have. So the health consequences are very much more in this group. And on top of that, there is a lot of violence in these situations. Partly because they are left out, they are secluded, they are isolated. That brings a very favorable environment for domestic violence which they suffer. So as far as health consequences, there are very many. I think I have given a few.
2021, they amended the law to make it as a crime. But Sri Lanka general marriage law is there. Other than that, we are not going in the basic criminal side. You don't want to make it criminal side, but family. Now, this is coming from sometimes earlier than this. My grandmother married when she was 15 years. Then under the new law, my grandfather has to be arrested. This is an ethical issue. It was there for a long time. So we have to step by step giving the awareness, as the Professor Lakshman said very clearly, how we are going this to the grassroots level. Now one case in Anuradhapura that came in High Court with a rape case, and there was a child to be born also, but with the consent of judge, attorney general representative, as well as the parents, they gave it. So in those circumstances, we have to see whether we are giving for abortions also illegal, they are not giving it. So the best is Australian law. In Australia, even with the consent of the parties, they are giving it. So my main worry is this: even we are having these laws, that's why sometimes we can see MMDA is correct, because they allow that 12, 16 for their protection. But legally we can't. I showed all the conventions, I saw all the regional laws, but how we are going to tackle this? That's why she had done a very good research. That research giving you the data, but these are only we are talking in Colombo. You may have this program in Angunukola Palace. You may have to have in Akrepattu. You may have it in Kantankud. So therefore, rather than we are talking in an AC room like this, we have to, go to the grassroots level and giving the idea. That's why it's not happening.
Thank you. Hishama, the study that you presented, yes, it was about the MMDA and about child marriages within Muslim communities. But what do we know about child marriages outside, non-Muslim child marriages? What do we know about that? And how are those trends in Sri Lanka comparatively to the Muslim child marriages?
Thank you so much for that question, because I think it's really important for us to also juxtapose what a legal change can do, and what are some are still the remaining gaps at a societal level. So prior to 1995, the General Marriage Registration Ordinance was, of course, amended along with the Canadian Marriage and Divorce Act to raise the age to 18 without exception for everyone except Muslims. A publicity campaign, interestingly, was not undertaken on these major policy changes in 1995, but it's noted from Amarsi De Silva's research titled Desk Research and Basic Field Data on Child Marriages on Statutory Rape and Underage Sex for UNICEF, conducted in 2009. It showed a very sharp decline that was seen from over 6,000 cases of registered marriages below 18 in the year prior to 1995 to about 2,000 in 1997 and 1,000 in 2003. That's where the data stops, but there's a sharp decline after that. The decline was noted among all ethnic groups except Muslims, which means that there was a very clear indication that there was a decline in registered child marriages within the non-Muslim community. Another research that I want to cite, 2013, Dr. Harini Amar Surya and Savitri Gunasekara's study on emerging concerns and case studies on child marriage in Sri Lanka from 7 districts. The study did find, as Dr. Lakshman mentioned, that early and child marriage was happening in the non-Muslim communities primarily as a result of the conflict, as a result of economic crisis situations. But from 71 case studies, there were only 6 cases of early marriage, 32 of cohabitation. A lot of these cases were actually also because of statutory rape. So there is, unfortunately, we don't have marry the rapist laws as some countries in the world, primarily, from the Middle East do, but it does unfortunately happen in practice. But the important thing that I want to highlight that this study brought out is the lack of consistency among officials that are supposed to be protecting children on how they respond to these incidents, particularly when it comes to statutory rape. And in the eyes of the law, the enforcement agency, the couple that is cohabiting with the prospect had a prospect of a future, together, and that was an acceptable arrangement without really understanding the consequences of it and whether that was the best interest of the child. The best interest practice gets lost in the context of keeping the face, keeping a good face. And I just want to conclude by saying that social values regarding the importance of maintaining a girl's chastity, unfortunately in Sri Lanka, still a very prevalent, stigmatized issue. Again, falsified, ages and all are coming up very strongly. strongly. And of course, economic and social security factors are a huge thing. And just very quickly, I want to state that the key difference between the Muslim community and the non-Muslim communities is a legal issue, of course, although the reasonings for it and the consequences for it, even in cohabited relationships or registered Muslim marriages, very similar. And that needs a systemic response by the state in addition to a legal one. But every time, unfortunately, what also happens is when Muslim community folks, when Muslim women and girls have gone to state institutions, including, mind you, the Human Rights Commission, to talk about, to raise these issues, the NCPA, when child marriages come up, they have been told, right? When they go to the police, this is in your law, we can't do anything. When they go to even health institutions, we have heard that we can't do anything, this is not our problem, it's your law. So every time you hear the word by any institution that does not want to touch on particularly the Muslim issue as being too sensitive or too complicated, and actors claiming that this is not something that can be tackled in the context of the broader state infrastructure, we need to figure out whether they're doing it only for convenience or whether it's actually for care or consideration, because it looks like it's the former. So yes, on one hand, legal reforms is absolutely needed. We can't exclude any one group, but there needs to be a systemic response for the protection of the rights of all children of Sri Lanka, regardless of faith groups.
Thank you, Hishama. Can I go back to Dr. Lakshman now? We've seen how education is disrupted when sort of those who have been taken into child marriages. But when this obviously affects the economic independence of girls, what are the long-term consequences on the poverty cycles in general and the societal development?
I think it's a short-term, mid-term, long-term consequence. I mean, there's no end to this problem. In this situation, it's not only the girl who suffers, even the bridegroom suffers out of this. In the traditional Muslim marriages or child marriages, there's a lot of blessing and support from the family at least. But the other group, non-Muslim families where the children cohabit or live together, very often that support is not there. So economically, they'll be very much worse off in that situation in the Sri Lankan context. And this leads to the young couple ending up with children, and those children will be worse off like their parents, because that economically this couple can't go ahead as they planned. All their expectations, all their whatever they had, the dreams they had are no more. They have to find a way of living. So this is not only for this generation, but the economical deficit goes on to the next generation. So it's a very significant thing. And again, as mentioned earlier, it is the law may not help in this situation. It is the support from the community and the other things. I think we'll be talking about that later. But that is where we need to push if you want to help this young couple who is in trouble.
Okay. So then, Professor Pratibha, considering that there is this relationship between poverty and child marriages, how effective have national and international policies really been in curbing this issue? Because poverty exists and the policies exist, and both of them are ignoring each other right now. So what key state interventions or enforcement mechanisms are needed to better protect especially vulnerable communities?
Absolutely. Now, when you see the West, they give a dole that is sufficient for their day-to-day living. And also, if you take France, even a wife divorce, the government will give a flat. So likewise, their system is well established. There is no poverty. At least if you come to South Africa and other African region, I have seen, even they have certain agricultural and other lands they can cultivate and live. But if you come to Sri Lanka and India, the poverty level is very high. So therefore, parents also think this is the best thing. It's like a human trafficking, selling the child. We have seen in Sri Lanka how many cases Sri Lanka women and child protection, and they have nabbed several cases where they have sold because of the purpose of poverty. So what we can come up with that. So the policies are there, policy makers, they are trying their best. But how effective when it comes to operative? Now, how many places are there Sri Lanka to protect children? Every office, every police station, there is a child and women care desk. National Child Protection Authority is there. Probation department is there. And also we have every divisional secretariat, child welfare officer, child protection officer is there. More than that, NGOs are a lot. They are working in a different angle. You must come in a one platform that can be done by FPA. FPA today, food for the thought, combine all these things and make a strong network, and then only you can make the lobby work. So the leadership can be taken by FPA. I have been working with from them. Lakshman and others are there. What we can do today, you think to make a strong network and have regional level, not officers, to train them, because if they are suffering from any economic hardships or social or cultural, there must be some assistance. Now 2015 Victims and Witness Protection Act is there. How many people are asking for that? So victims are there. Who will become the victim? The lady girl will become a victim. So therefore there must be some type of society work network, which I have seen in Cambodia, which I have seen in several countries, how the society try to help them. Even some tribes are there in African countries. They always protect their children. So that is the way. That's why in Buddhism, Manusana Vasu Puttana. So individualism, rather than Sri Lanka, we have a cultural society. So I think we have to take, law is not enough. Other than the law, there are other surrounding factors, how effectively we can make it coming a policy. I am so worried this, without any exceptional MMD try to change the age for 18 years, that report is there, but several Muslim MPs, they are not supporting for that. So how we can change their mind? This is coming from long history. But the Savalami law, Candian law, they were very effectively changed that age. So changing the age is not enough. So what type of other aspects we have to see? I think FPA can make a good network. Thank you.
That gives me an excellent in to ask Hishama's final question. Is we know the struggles that have been sort of fought to try and reform the MMDA, but if you can tell us your lived experience of what are those challenges actually to talk about child marriage and advocating for reform, and what do you think, in your opinion, what are the recommendations to effectively address this, or maybe is there a different way in which this needs to be approached?
Thank you so much for that question, and also this opportunity to speak about this a little bit more. So, as you all know, the reforms for the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act to be amended is spanning decades. It's one of the longest advocacy that women's groups have done, probably, for a single issue. And it went from being an issue that was spoken in smaller circles, very hushed voices, to it actually being a national level discussion and debate, and almost like a lunch dinner table conversation for multiple households in the past 5 to 7 years. And that's because of the women's advocacy from within the women's movement, Muslim women's movement in Sri Lanka. But there have been considerable pushback from conservative groups, as Shanuki mentioned, spanning from attacks on women's, liberties on what they say online, but also offline, to staff of different women's rights organizations who was providing support services for women, being sort of accused, and they're being sort of, the backlash on them has been really fierce to the point where they had to leave jobs. And this has been ongoing continuously at the community level. At the national level, as you mentioned, we have the Muslim MPs, many of them who have actually, and we have tracked their stances over time, have changed their stances consecutively multiple times, to a point where now there's almost overwhelming agreement to raise the age to 18. So that's a huge win. At least that is there, except for one or two Muslim MPs who will not be named, but continue to block the process. So we are very close. After decades of advocacy, there is now a draft bill that's supposed to be progressive that is in the Ministry of Justice's care at the moment. And this draft bill that raises the age to 18, among many other issues, because mind you, we cannot only reform that one issue because it's so linked, that needs to be pushed through Parliament, hopefully in the coming few months. But I want to raise something really important here, and that is that child marriage or child rights can never be excused in the name of religion or culture, freedom of religion and belief or whatever. Never. Not in any context. Maldives, 100% Muslim country, used Islamic arguments to raise the age to 18 in 2022. So there is actually jurisprudence from within the religion that have been used to reform. So there's no excuse there. And also, Sri Lanka is party to so many international conventions. Why is there an exception for children of a faith-based community? So the state has the foremost responsibility to protect child rights, regardless of whether that child is born Muslim or Christian or Sinhalese or has no religion. Regardless. There is no exception, and the responsibility lies with the state. If the state has to remove child rights out of family laws and bring in a Child Rights Act like India did that prohibits marriage, do that. Because child rights is not marriage laws are for consenting adults, and children are children. So child rights has to be exceptionally protected. And lastly, if the state determines the age at which you get a driving license, the age at which you get into contracts, the age, that all children, despite that child marriage is detrimental to the health, the well-being of children, then it should apply to all children. So it is a state responsibility, and I'm here holding state accountable. Additionally, every single organization working on the rights of children, on child protection, etc., there is no excuse to talk about this issue. It's everyone's issue. It's these are children of this country, and so the perceived cultural and religious arguments can no longer be used anymore. And additionally to that, once that particular law is amended, and subsequently and also parallelly, more sustained reforms to our justice system that benefits all communities, to our healthcare system, to our educational policies, to the way that we go about doing sexual rights and reproductive health to adolescents, all of that needs reform. And we need to really turn inwards and say, what are the gaps that are affecting all children of Sri Lanka? And hence, concentrated efforts like the one that FPA is doing or is proposing or has been proposed to do is important, because a comprehensive response is needed in addition to a specific legal one as well. And I'll stop there.
Here, here. All right, we have around 5 minutes left, so I want to open it out to the audience. Are there any questions, any thoughts you'd like to share?
Thank you for absolutely excellent discussion and presentations. A lot of food for thought. I just want to comment that I feel there is a difference with the Muslim child marriage, what Dr. Lakshman is talking about as living together. I feel, is when it comes to Muslim children, it's actually parents who arrange the marriage for the children. It could be the poverty-driven issue where the younger the child is, the less the dowry for a Muslim girl, and therefore it's easier to get her married much younger because you don't have to give as much. So it's a very systematically difficult one unless you bring that law in, which is absolutely important. I think this living together business is because of our cultural fear of sexual intercourse. Why don't we allow our children to have sex? They will have sex. Let them have sex, but give them contraception. Don't tell them to get married. You do not get married to the first person you have sexual intercourse. We are so culturally bound that our virginity is so important that you got to be clean and pure for the man you get married to, that immediately you have a child who has a sexual relationship and a sexual intercourse with somebody, that you got to immediately, whether it's a rapist or, at that point parents go nuts. They don't care. So it's not that the parents force, it's because the culture makes the girl not a good marriage prospect for future, and then because of the relationship she's been in, it just has to be that she goes and lives together. So I think if we can give comprehensive sexual education, we teach parents this importance of allowing children to use contraceptives, that we don't actually hold this thing called virginity as such an important issue, we can stop the living together. Because just because you have sex with somebody doesn't mean you want to live your whole life with that person for the rest of your life. So I think it's such a huge cultural issue here that, that itself is something that I'm not sure how we can come out of for the living together. Because I know a lot of parents who have children who are living together saying, we didn't want this, but she went and had this relationship. And what was I to do? We had to get, we didn't want her to get married. We wanted her to study. But she went herself and did this. So now she has to live with this consequence. So, it's all about how open we as a society are, and we can be willing to be open, and this is a punishment to our girls. So, comment.
Thank you. And I think there was another question. Oh, there are many. All right.
Actually, mine is not a question. I would like to congratulate all the three presenters, Professor Pratibha Mahanama, Dr. Lakshman Senanaik. Professor Pratibha is one of my teachers too, and the lady you. And I think it's what you said at the end is very correct. No child should left behind, whether it is Muslim or Christian, Buddhist or any other Hindu, whatever. The child is a child. Children are children. I think that is the most important thing, whether living together or whether we are using contraceptives. Those all are not matters. We have to protect the rights of the children. I think that is my, as a mother, as a grandma, I would say that is the most important thing we have to take as our message. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. There are two questions on this side.
Hi, sorry, I came in a bit late, so I don't know if this point was covered. Just wanted to ask because I heard a lot of conversation around culture and religion. I was wondering what the findings are, what these courses around poverty and socioeconomic background, because I have heard stories of, parents kind of having to give away their children for dowry or kind of having to quote unquote sell their daughters because they just don't have the financial means. And I think that specific issue kind of transcends cultures and religions because at the end of the day, it does not matter, right? If you can't put food on the table for your child, you're sometimes made to think that this is the best option for your child as well as for yourself and your family. So I was just wondering if there's any discourse around that, any findings?
We actually discussed that. The correlation was there, and Professor Pratibha also talked about case examples of where certain countries give doles and financial support to families who can't afford it to have their children. But yes, you can.
I like to add one thing. These dowry contracts. Now, if you say Tesavalame law, there are three type of property. Thadiyathitam property, acquired property, and then Mudusam property and Sidanam. That is, Sidanam is dowry. Even it is immoral, unethical, it is happening. And Sri Lanka, those are not legal, but moral offenses. Dowry contracts are there, and we have seen in divorce cases, dowry not given, and the judge said no dowry, not a part of this. So we have to see how immoral contracts are dowry contracts. We are discussing in the law also. That's a very good point where it is selling. That can be come under child trafficking, also human trafficking. But nowadays it is not much talking, but there are under personal laws this mahar and kavakuli, likewise in the Muslim law there are. But that's a good point where if you can ban this type of dowries at least to save our children. Thank you.
Thank you.
My question is to all the panelists. I work at a medical center in Valigama, so it's mostly predominantly Muslim communities. We get a lot of girls that are around 16 coming with their husbands that are about 27, 30. What are some recommendations you can provide to healthcare providers to be a little more understanding to these girls who come in, because obviously they don't have the education? So
Are there any more questions? There are two more. We'll take two or three together because I think otherwise we're running out of time.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Thank you very much for this presentation. I think you're talking about the child marriage and all, and I can see the panelists up there saying that child marriage is not. Again, we are not for the child marriage, but just it's just out of curiosity, I just want to. I don't know what your take is in a situation where in a girl who is below 18, under 18, and she's in love with somebody else. I think it's very similar to her. Her husband is above 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, and she becomes pregnant. How is the law in your country? Before I share my country's situation.
Sure. And let's take the third question as well. Sorry, Professor Pratibha had to leave because he had another engagement. We have other two speakers here.
My question is about there's a circular in the Ministry of Health. We say if they are in a stable relationship, we provide, and especially if they are in this so-called living together and come to access reproductive health services from pregnancy to other, we don't look it into legal kind of aspect. But the issue we are facing in the medical sector, who are we to judge? How are we to judge they are in a stable relationship? At the moment, we ask few questions whether there is domestic violence and give services, and once in a while they come with MLEF, we see. But AG's department, these kind of cases are issue which they try to solve through time. But research findings are that many of these so-called living relationship, by when they are around 2021, that so-called living together relationship or marriage is a failure, and there is another child who is looking after by the grandmother or the family, or the mother has vanished. Now, as professionals, how should we address it? May be a very small amount, but issues are big. How are we to handle it?
Great question, difficult question. So maybe we'll take the first one about, as health professionals, what kind of sort of approach and services should be provided?
I think as health professionals, we are expected to provide the best for this girl as well as for anybody else. So there is no discrimination as far as health professionals are concerned. We have to do everything that is possible for the best interest of this child. Clear. However, we had a small issue. I'll mention that because needs to be clarified. If a girl gets pregnant less than 16 years, then we assume that somebody has had sexual relationships with her. That comes under the penal code as statutory rape. Yeah, let me clear this because I just want to clear it, I think. It comes as statutory rape. An offense have been committed. Initially, they expected to report this one. Number of midwives were taken, government sector midwives were taken to courts in 3 or 4 instances because they did not report. Problem with that kind of attitude and approach is that if you report, they don't come to us for our services, which makes the situation worse for the girl. So the Family Health Bureau approached the Attorney General, and Attorney General interpreted this rule in such a way that healthcare providers are not exempted from reporting these people. That circular was issued. It's not in the penal code. Circular was issued very recently. We clarified it with the Solicitor General, and based on that, you can happily provide services. You will not be punished or penalized or anything like that. So it's very clear as far as healthcare providers are concerned.
Doctor, is that also applicable to Muslim communities? Because the ones
It doesn't matter. None of those things distinguish ethnicity or any other thing.
Penal code, the penal code provision does.
because the most of the girls that we get that are
No,
underage.
it's not. It's a common law thing. I think
Okay.
the penal code does not.
The penal code has an exception for married Muslim girls under the
Yes.
age of 16.
So-
Yeah, the penal code unfortunately does not protect the
Yeah,
rights
that's
of
why
married
I was
Muslim
wondering,
girls.
like, if someone comes in and they're underage and the
Yes.
Muslim, like, how would we as healthcare professionals provide kind of a human?
Sure.
Yeah.
So a couple of things that I want to mention, and there might obviously be more, but because of time. First and foremost, I think it's really important to assume that this is obviously an underage marriage. It's unfortunately allowed by the current law, hopefully not a future law that's coming very soon. I'm manifesting right now. But for the moment, it is unfortunately legal. However, she deserves an informed choice about her bodily autonomy. So as much information as you can provide her about her options, if you can give her that in her space that she feels safe, all the options that she has, whether she would like contraceptives, whatever information you might have to additionally provide for her that she might not get from support services elsewhere, that is of foremost importance. Secondly, of course, as was mentioned by this lady here, to find out whether she's at risk, right? So if she's at risk somehow, there are obviously telltale signs. There might be a way that she would communicate and see if she's at risk of violence, if she requires any more additional services that could potentially, support her life. That, I think, is another step that needs to happen, particularly in cases of child marriage. The vulnerability to domestic violence is, of course, very high. So an additional step needs to be taken to grant that care. And as Dr. Ashram mentioned, the best possible informed, consensual choice of healthcare that you can give her would be what we can do right now for her. But additionally, again, I can't stress enough that there has to be a systems change, to protect the rights of all children in Sri Lanka, including a societal shift in how we think about sexuality, in the rights that are, that even, the ideal law would be to recognize civil partnerships at some stage, because that is autonomy if two autonomous adults are making that choice. But our laws will nowhere get there anytime soon. But I hope that answered your question, like, in a really quick thing, like the best thing you can do. And very quickly
Go over to that question.
the lady, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, but as Dr. Lakshman mentioned, there is a penal penal code, there is a penal code provision that caps statutory rape age as 16. So there is a criminal offense that is tied to that age. However, there's an exception for the Muslim community of married girls. So unfortunately, that even the penal code does not extend to Muslim girls. During the course of this session, we basically mentioned that there are cohabited relationships that do happen. Lots of push and pull factors, including economic factors. Actually, majority were economic factors as well, but a lot around stigma and the shame. When it comes to teenage pregnancy, healthcare providers have to take care regardless of marital status. Like that is a given in state institutions right throughout.
And there was a final difficult question. How do we tackle it? Do you mind?
Oh, tackle poverty.
Yeah.
Got into
Oh,
the
yes.
circular.
Yes,
I
yes.
think that I am putting the question to sir because it's a challenge as people who are in the system to really assess they are in a stable relationship. At the end of the day, sir, you were talking about the best interest of the child. Now,
Yes.
the research is showing the data that these adolescent live in relationship by 20s they are no more there
Yes.
and on top of it the situation has worsened with another child for the family as a burden. Yes, we have an issue about the not having sexual rights and informed choices, but caregivers are now put into the ball has put into the court of the caregiver. So have we consciously, how are we gods to say they are in a stable relationship with this particular time?
I think, Anuruddha, you have put me in a real difficult situation. I think there are times where the gods have to keep quiet.
Well done. What an answer.
No, I think I would give me another example. Let me give you another example. We were supposed to report all abortions. I had never ever reported a single case, and I haven't gone to prison. It's an individual judgment most of the time, and individual judgment, and you always do it for the best interest of the person. You take a risk, of course, you take a risk, but it's worth the risk. So, if somebody comes to us, we look after her. We need not go into all that details because we are exempted. This circular, actually the original circular, I don't know whether it has been changed later, does not mention about this stability thing. It says, because you all are providing this service, because if you don't provide these services, the harm will come to the child. You are exempted from this. That is what the circular says. Subsequently, I don't know whether there was a discussion whether it should go to somebody else and talk about the stability thing. But at the moment, as far as I know, we can simply go ahead and manage. I think we are safe.
And we're going to bring that to a close now because I think we've run a few minutes over time, but luckily you don't have to rush off to any other sessions. You can end your day. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. I don't know whether enjoy is the right word, but I hope it left us inspired to keep this conversation going, advocate for more research and knowledge around the matter, and to work together globally, not just nationally, to end this crime, as I would put it. Thank you so much. And thank you to the panel.